Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Coach Lysa, and welcome to this episode of Unshakeable Uplift. I hope you will be blessed by this. And today's topic is a little heavy. And so I kind of want to tee this up and really spend just a minute talking about why we're tackling navigating loss. And so in the tagline for Unshakable Uplift, I have the three words uplifted, healed, and unshakable. And the fact that healed is in there basically is an indicator that we have things in our lives that we need to be healed from. We've all had wounds, we've all had difficulties of circumstances, and I think all of us have had some form of loss. And I don't want to just talk about loss as something that we experience and move on from. It's not just the loss of a person, the death of a person, but it can be the loss of a dream, the loss of a relationship, a season of life that's difficult. I know several friends personally who lost their businesses during COVID. The economy just couldn't or didn't support them. It can be the loss of a dream, the loss of potential. There's a lot of things that define our loss. And loss doesn't always come with a funeral. Sometimes it's that suffering in silence and the suffering by yourself in the quiet that doesn't get acknowledged. And I really want to shine a light on that today. And the other thing, again, one of the perplexities of loss is that life just keeps going. For us personally, a number of years ago, back in the 90s, we lost a business and we lost everything. And one of the strangest things is that life around us just kept on marching forward. And so it's navigating that diversity of you're dealing with this massive loss. We ended up losing our house and we lost just about everything. And so it's that navigating that while everything around you still goes on and you still have bills to pay, you still need to eat, you try to sleep. And so it's this navigating that. And sometimes it's just not obvious to people around you. You can look perfectly fine to people from the outside, and inside you're dying. And if you're still in a job while you're navigating loss, you're expected to show up and do your job. There may be compassion, but it's not, and I'm not going to say an excuse in a bad way, it's not a reason that's oftentimes accommodated for us to be less than our best. Loss isn't always loud, but it is always meaningful. And so it's one of the most difficult things we're going to face in our lives. And so my guest today has navigated loss a couple of different ways. And so Diane Weseman is going to join us today and share her perspective on loss. And Diane is a leader who believes that you're far more important than what you do. And I'll go into a little bit more of her introduction in just a moment. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I'll introduce Diane fully, and we'll tackle this interesting, challenging topic of navigating loss and yet remaining unshakable. We'll be right back. Good morning and welcome back. And Diane, welcome to Unshakeable Uplift. I'm so glad that you've joined us this morning. Good morning. Welcome back to Unshakable Uplift. And welcome, Diane. Thank you for being here with me this morning.
Thank you for inviting me, Lisa.
And so I want to take just a moment and introduce Diane. And first, Diane, I really want to thank you for being willing to come on and address this challenging and somewhat difficult topic of navigating loss. I genuinely appreciate that. And so, Diane, you are a people first leader who believes that people are far more important than what they do. You are known for both being efficient and intentional, which I love, with a natural ability to encourage and uplift those around you. You have an MBA from Boise State University, go Broncos, and more than 50 years of experience building businesses. Diane, you're known for wisdom, clarity, and bringing heart to every conversation. You focus on helping individuals make good choices to live younger, healthier, and more abundant lives, rooted in faith, family, and meaningful connection. And you are also an exquisite sourdough baker. You do amazing quilting and you crochet. So it's just one of those hands-on ways that you enjoy living life, and that is fabulous. Diane lives in Kuna, Idaho, with her husband Jim, and together they share a growing legacy through their children, Tyler and Bethany, and 5 grandchildren. So good morning and welcome again.
Thank you.
And so we're going to jump into this topic of navigating loss. And it is this simple and complex topic all at once. You know, when we experience grief, and my words is grief is never convenient. And so we often think of grief as, mourning the death of a loved one, but sometimes we mourn the potential of what could have been or should have been. And so as you step into sharing about your experience with loss, what have you learned through the different types of loss that you've encountered, and what has it revealed about your strength, your ability, and your identity?
Wow, that's a lot, Lisa. How long do we have?
Yeah.
So I had some loss of friends in a car accident. It was death. And my dear brother Daryl, who is 2 years older than I am, was there to comfort me. But a couple short years later, my dear brother wasn't there to comfort me when he had a motorcycle accident. And it wasn't death. It was unconsciousness for 9 months. It was 42 years of living in a wheelchair, impaired, and much like a stroke victim. I lost him on that day, and I lost him 42 years later when he passed.
Mhm.
And I had a friend who lost her little brother while he was still unconscious in the hospital. And she told me, Diane, there are things worse than death. Grief is interesting because it doesn't come to everybody the same way, and it does not
Right.
come, it comes in waves, is the best way I can describe it. And it's maybe like the ocean. Every seventh wave is huge. It's the one
Mhm. Mhm.
she didn't
Yeah.
have to take. A sound, a smell, a thought, a person can instantly put you back into that grief. And navigating that has been difficult because when I lost the Daryl that he was, I lost my confidence. He was my greatest.
Mm. Oh, wow.
He was my best friend. Hadn't always been. We used to fight like cats and dogs, but
Like siblings?
like siblings, yes. And the whole family was shaken. There were 3 other children and my parents. We were all very shaken. We miraculously stayed together, but the grief doesn't end. It's not
Mhm.
like you can put an endpoint and say, well, at 1 year, I'm done grieving.
Right.
That was probably the biggest surprise for me.
Okay. And through that time, where did you find resiliency just to get up the next morning and keep going?
We had hope. We as a family treasured that hope, and we spoke it to one another.
Mhm. Mhm.
My sister-in-law, who was fairly new to the family, wrote a poem, "You Mustn't Quit," and posted it on Daryl's hospital wall so we could all read it to him whenever we were there. We quoted him verses of hope from the Bible. We spoke hope to each other. We didn't know if he'd ever wake up.
Yeah.
It's it's
Yeah.
one of those things where you pray that he doesn't die, and then you pray that he wakes up, and then you pray that he gets better, and it's just it's a journey. It's a journey of hope and faith, and my parents were strong Christians, and they loved each of us, and that was what kept us going.
No, that's really good. You know, and Psalms 34:18 says that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted. He rescues those whose spirits are crushed. How did the support of a verse like that carry you? Because again, I noticed a little bit of the situation. Your parents understandably needed to focus on your brother and his recovery. What kind of happened to the rest of the family, and what dynamics changed there that I'm going to say either accentuated the loss or added a different layer to the loss?
Yeah, it was chaos. It truly was chaos in a family that operated fairly well up to that point. Um, my Daryl and I had just returned from being student missionaries for a year in Indonesia. Like less than a month we'd been home. So everybody was excited to be back together. And then my oldest brother had moved to Southern California with his wife because he was going to medical school. And he started medical school the day Daryl had his accident.
Mm,
So they were at distance. My younger sister and brother were like 12, 15 years old at the time. And they kind of got lost in the shuffle. And I was home fielding calls, taking care of things. My father had to continue to work. My mother spent as much time as she could at the hospital. So yeah, it changed the entire dynamic of our family. And
yeah.
I became I had to make everything look good. I had to be the face of the family, and we had to be strong and carry on. And well, we're just absolutely breaking apart inside.
Yeah. Yeah. So you got, I'm going to use the word forced into a role that really wasn't a role you would ever have signed up for. Again, stepping into that role. And how old were you when Daryl had his accident?
I was 18.
Senior in high school?
Actually, I was a headed to be a sophomore in college.
Okay, okay. All right. And so again, you stepped into this role that you really hadn't signed up for. And again, at that point, you had no way of knowing what the future was going to look like, right? You
Exactly.
didn't, you had no clue that it was going to be 40 years of living with this, in a way, living with that loss. So in those early days, talk to me about the support you got from your faith.
That was what carried me through. That was what carried everyone through, and we spoke it to each other.
Okay.
It was a short 6 weeks until Daryl and I were both supposed to go back to college. And I told my parents, I'll stay home and help. And they said, no, no, you need to go. And that was the hardest thing because I was there alone, and people go, well, when's Daryl coming? He's not.
Yeah.
He's fighting for his life in a hospital bed. And Daryl was a very friendly, loving person. He was everything. He was so capable and so fun and not full of himself.
Mhm.
He had his flaws, trust me. But as I went back to college, I spent more time in the Word, and I grasped onto the 23rd Psalm, and it was
Mhm.
particularly useful because the valley of the shadow of death was what I lived for 42 years.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that that I was always in a depression. It wasn't that I couldn't live my life. It was that I hung on to that, Jesus, you are with me. And that knowing that I could run to him anytime it got too heavy
Yeah.
was a lifesaver.
Yeah. And then one of the things I want to contrast here is, so on the one hand, there's this continual sense of loss and honestly, even grief. Even at that point, you were grieving not having Daryl at college with you. You were grieving all those kinds of things. And then there's still hope and the opportunity for joy. And so we're going to take a quick break, Diane. And when we come back, could you talk about balancing that contrast between continual grief and still trying to go on with life and finding some joy? So we'll be right back. All right, and we are back. We're continuing to talk about navigating loss and navigating grief. And so, Diane, can you kind of compare that contrast for us a little bit of the reality that regardless of what our loss is, whether it is the death of someone, or in this case, the incapacitation of your brother, and a lot of unknown, life around you keeps going on. You went back to college and tried or did, kind of focus on studies and learning and moving on with life. What was it like to have that dichotomy of the loss and life moving in parallel?
It was tough. It was I was young. This is when you're supposed to be enjoying life and having fun. And so for me, it was a balance of grief and joy. And if I could go back and tell myself, allow yourself to grieve. Take
Mm-hmm.
those moments, and they are precious. And I know that sounds really strange, but I have learned that those moments of grief bring healing.
Mm.
And that was something I chose joy. And that's one of my favorite things, is choose joy, because no matter who's left, who's here, who's not, you can choose joy. And so anytime I could see Daryl, I would make the trip to see him. And I would bring joy into his room, whether he could respond or not. And one day I saw him respond, and again was filled with hope. And of course, my hope was that he would be completely healed and come back to college with me.
Yeah.
That's not what happened. That doesn't mean that my hope was useless. It just meant that God's plan was different than mine. And that's something that I had to learn and grow through. And so the joy of staying connected to my friend Jesus, and allowing my grief to flow, has been a lifelong process.
So would you say that you ignored the grief? So you said if you could go back and teach your younger self something, it would be to actually allow yourself to grieve. Did you stuff the grief or just set it aside, not give yourself permission? What words would you use?
I would say I hid my grief.
Ah,
I had to stay strong for everybody else. And so not many people saw me cry. Not many people saw the pain that I had. I think that if I would have shared it more, that if I would have been real about it, that it would have been a better process, and people would have understood more. People, you can never understand. Someone who has grief, my friend was so brilliant in saying there are things worse than death. Your grief is different than mine. But she is very intuitive. But just allowing people to see that there are two sides to grief. There's a joy that life goes on for everyone else, and there's a grief that you've lost the potential, as you said.
yeah, no, that's really good. That's really good. And so, in a grounded, steady, unshakable way, if you could look back and sit down and have a conversation with that 18-year-old self, is there anything else you would give her wisdom or insight about beyond what you've already shared?
I would just say life's a journey. Allow the journey to happen. Don't try to control it. Be confident in who you are. You're a daughter of the King, and you are given this life. Live it well.
That's really good. My mom was a very wise person, and again, she too endured, many different kinds of loss and grief in her life. And kind of one of her um, phrases that she used, not frequently, but that was impactful to me, was, "This too shall pass." And it's like when we're in the middle of grieving, it feels consuming and it feels like it can be unending. And again, that's where we have to have that bigger, longer term perspective. And sometimes it's like, I don't want life to go on, but it does anyway. And sometimes it's, is this ever going to end? This feels so heavy. I'm so tired of carrying this weight. This too shall pass. The grief does lessen. It does not ever go away. And I've shared with you too, I lost a brother to an accident. Um, Gosh, it's been almost 20 years ago now. But again, there's that initial shock of, excuse me, what did you just say? And that denial. And then you move, it is the 5 stages of grief. You move into the acceptance, and then you get really angry because for my brother, it probably could have been avoided. It was he made a choice that contributed to the situation, and then you move into the acceptance and life goes on. But it doesn't ever completely go away, right? And so
Right.
this becomes a piece of your heart that you carry. So we've got just another minute here to wrap up. Can you summarize any words of wisdom to share with our listeners this morning for the loss that they're navigating?
Yes, I can. One more thing I would have told myself is this isn't going to be the last grief of your life.
Mm,
Life has lots of grief, lots of sorrow. Things like infertility, divorce, bankruptcy, things that are very inside of you, abuse. Things are going to come. Jesus says in this world, you will have trouble, but take heart. And I would say to anyone who's navigating loss right now, take heart. Go to the healer. He is what put my family and me through the years that we've been able to navigate the grief and deal with the circumstances. You just don't have
yeah,
grief, you have circumstances. So,
yeah. Diane, thank you so much for being on here this morning and sharing your heart and being really transparent. It is appreciated. So we're going to take a short break and then we'll be right back. All right, welcome back. And I hope that this session has been a blessing for someone. We all navigate loss, and loss can happen every day in big and small ways. I mentioned in my life, we lost a business and kind of lost everything. I know I have several friends who are estranged from adult children. That is its own form of loss, that loss of relationships. In the offense driven world that we live in, I have people that I know who have lost lifelong friends over political division. And it's just the reality of the day we live in. And so I really want to challenge and encourage all of us to remain unoffendable. And that's easier said than done. But anger is a self chosen emotion. When we stay in the driver's seat of our life, and again, this is me with my coaching hat on, when we stay in the driver's seat of our life and we acknowledge and genuinely process our emotions, they don't control us, we do control them. And it's not that you can choose to grieve or not grieve. Even if you stuff grief inside of you, it's still there. It's not going away. Loss shows up in ways that we don't realize. And again, as a holistic coach, spirit, soul, and body, any emotion, including grief or loss that you stuff, is going to have a physical impact on your body. And we want to be able to live authentic lives. We want to be able to be true to what we're experiencing. And as Diane mentioned in her circumstance, she hid her grief. A lot of us do that. And for me personally, I compartmentalized it. It's probably very similar to the same thing as hiding it. But when I would go into work during that period of time, I would open a door in my brain, shove the circumstances and the grief in there, close the door, go to work, do my job, and then on the way home, that door would open and that grief and the loss and all the things I was experiencing would sneak back out. It took me decades to really process through that. Whereas if I had not compartmentalized it, but allowed it to process through in real time, it would have shortened the duration. It also would have had less impact on my physical body. And so I just really want to encourage you again, Unshakable Uplift is, uplifted, healed, and encouraged. The uplift is that we are resilient human beings. We are stronger than we know. And sometimes life gives us that opportunity to flex that strength, whether we want to or not. There is healing available. And in Joel 2:25, God tells us that he says that he will give us back what we lost. And now for Diane, she didn't get her brother Daryl back, but she did get life. She got joy. Life went on and life has been good. And I guess we maybe didn't talk about that. And I also want to mention Hebrews 10:36. Patient endurance is what you need now so that you will continue to do God's will. Then you will receive all that he has promised. And so today's unshakable key is wherever you are, acknowledge the truth and the reality of where you're at, but then keep going, not in pressure, but in trust. And that trust says that there's hope for tomorrow. That trust says that I have everything I need to live a good and unshakable life, and I am never alone. Thank you for joining us for this episode. Come back next week when I'm going to delve into unshakable identity, the building blocks and the foundation of really living your life how you were intended. Thank you.
In a world that keeps on shaking, I'm standing on your truth. I spent